Good morning, friends. The fifth Sunday after Easter. This is the last of the Sundays in the Easter festival. Next Sunday we have the celebration of the Ascension, which we'll talk about next Sunday. But here we have now the 5 Sundays of Easter and all the things that were going on during this time leading up to the Ascension. The appearances of Jesus, the disciples trying to come to terms with it, people talking about it, some people seeing him, some people not believing, and so on and so forth. So, a lot of turbulence. For some people, great rejoicing, the people that had seen him. And many people had seen him, sometime in 1s and 2s, sometimes the women, first thing in the morning on the Sunday, sometimes a larger collection of people. But what seemed to be happening was that the people who weren't there, who didn't see him, had a great deal of difficulty coming to terms with this idea. Because there's really nothing in their lives that they can compare this particular experience with. He might have spoken about it to them. They might have sort of tried to understand what he was saying when he was talking to them in private about the resurrection, about moving through the experience of death, about appearing in a spiritual body. But they seem to have had a lot of trouble understanding exactly what that meant. I think for us, 2,000 years later, we have more of a chance of understanding this. We see all sorts of films about people, not people, that appear as ghosts or whatever you want to call them, after people have died. So we might have what we might call a suspension of disbelief, but we might think that looks almost half reasonable. And wouldn't it be nice anyway if that was the case? In the Liberal Catholic Church, we have a very clear understanding that, as we use the expression, death is just a portal to a new way of life. So we understand that this process is very real and is the same for everyone, regardless of whether they believe it or not. But, as we read in Hamlet, we have no visitors from the other side to come and confirm this. Except for one, Jesus, at that time, where he came and showed himself in his spiritual body. So, we have to go on this journey for ourselves. We have to come to terms with this ourselves and understand it. But at the end of the day, this is one of the messages of the Easter festival. One of the messages. We read the collect here and we get a bit of an idea of what are the other messages for us. Lord Christ, whose wondrous triumph thy faithful people year by year do celebrate. So we celebrate this every year. We think about this every year. We go through the intensification of concentrate, meditate, think about it. How does it apply to us? We think about that process every year. And we think about, as the years roll on, that triumph over sin, following the glorious ensemble, which is an old-fashioned word for example, may rise into the fullness of our spiritual heritage. And so there we come to the other message. The message, one of the other messages of the Gospels, and the message of Easter, our spiritual heritage. And what is the spiritual heritage? The spiritual heritage is we have the Christ within us. We are actually, at our core, God-like, with a personality, not the other way around. And when we walk and talk and move about, using our bodies, using our emotions, and using our intellect, that collection of entities we call the personality. But that's not the core of us. That's not essentially what we are. What we are is part of Christ. The interesting thing is we still have our individuality, but we become part of Christ. That's where the soul resides. So when Jesus says to us, I've shown you what I can do, I've shown you signs and wonders that I can do, and I expect when you come into your full realization of what you really are, you'll do much more than I'll do. Now, if someone from that time, that first century, was transported here today, was sitting here today, and looked around, they would think that we're obviously all godlike, with all these amazing things that we've got. We've got phones, we've got cameras, we've got lights that you just turn on with a switch. You don't light anything, they just pop into life. We've got television, we've got movies, we've got aeroplanes. It's extraordinary the things that we have accomplished using our intellect over the last 2,000 years. Some of the things that we're not quite so good at is balancing the ethics and responsibilities of all those that we have responsibility for around us, and then in what we might call the kingdoms below us, animal, vegetable, the mineral world. So, we have trouble sorting this out. We have to sort it out, we know that, because we live here. But coming back to the essence of the teachings, we are Christ-like at our core, and our personalities need to be transformed in us to realize this and act like that. We have a prayer at the very, very start of, if you like, the preparation for Easter. The prayer right back at the start of Ash Wednesday, coming into Lent prior to the preparation, or starting the preparation leading to Easter. And we say, God be with us in everything that we do, and that give us your strength so that everything we start, continue, and end can glorify your name. So in that one prayer, if we look at it quietly and think about it and unpack it for ourselves, we actually have a plan of how to proceed with our lives, trying to link with our soul, with the Christ within. That is, everything we do is for the glory of God. Now, it's very easy to say that, and it sounds rather old-fashioned and maybe just a little bit pious. But that is actually the way that we should be proceeding. And it puts us on the path back to God. It puts us on the path back to our core, back to our Christ-like core, which is individually different for everybody on the planet. All different for us. Sometimes it takes us a while to work out what we should be doing here. Sometimes people never work out what they should be doing here. They do a little bit of this, a little bit of that, always feel uncomfortable, always feel disorientated, they're not too sure whether they're in the right place at the right time. There is a voice always available to us that gives us that sort of instruction, but we must be quiet. It's a very quiet voice, but that's a subject for a different time. The message of Easter is this: we have a spiritual body. The spiritual body exists through the portal of death. The spiritual body is our essence, not our personality. And Jesus said to the people when he was on the other side of the period of crucifixion and growth, when he was on the other side of that, go and preach the gospel to everybody in the world. So, here we are at the end of the period of Easter. Then we'll have the Ascension, and then after that, Whitsunday. Now, in the epistle that Wendy read this morning, this is from the Acts of the Apostles. The Acts of the Apostles is after Jesus is gone. And the Acts of the Apostles start with Whitsunday, or Pentecost, the appearance of the Holy Spirit, the enlivening of the apostles. We'll come to that in the next couple of Sundays. But in here, this passage that we read, the person who's speaking, probably Peter, the person who's speaking is saying, all this was prophesied, and you can read it in our, we call the Old Testament, they wouldn't have called it the Old Testament. You can read it in the prophets, and you can see what's being said. One of the things when we hear the word prophet, we think, we live in a time where we're trying to work out what's news and what's not news. So we have this sort of unfortunate phrase, fake news. No such thing in those times. They had prophets which prophesied, but sometimes they didn't understand the interpretation. So when it happened, or people particularly gifted in explaining it, they would explain what the prophets were saying. And that's what that passage in the epistle talks about. And it talks about Peter saying, who's speaking to the people, this is where Jesus came from, this was his lineage, and then all of you were there because you all helped put him to death. You were all swept up in this evil thing that happened where you all became slightly insane. Those are not what written words in there. But everybody just went a bit nuts. And in the middle of that, you put Jesus to death. But we can tell you, he is alive spiritually right here. And then all the people say, who were listening to him, which is not in this particular epistle, they say, well, we now feel very contrite and very sad about that. And as it's recorded in the Acts of the Apostles, about 5,000 people were baptized at one go there. There's an extraordinary acceleration of the Spirit, an extraordinary expansion of a heart, feeling, the softening of the heart. In the Gospel, the same sort of thing is said, but it just spells out the details. This is now right at the end of St. Mark's Gospel, which has just got 16 chapters, relatively small narrative. And it talks about when the women went on Sunday and they came back and told everybody, and as it says in here, it just says, the men were hard-hearted. One of the things that Jesus continuously said when he was preaching, it was 3 years of preaching, he said, I'm here to soften your hearts. I'm here to soften your hearts so you can hear the Holy Spirit speaking to you. You can hear what you should be doing. Here, the apostles, well, they weren't apostles, they were just a group of people that were following Jesus at this stage. Nothing much to sort of show for it. Couldn't write a very flash CV at this point. Couldn't tell everyone how they've done wonderful things. They were all a bit frightened and worried. They said, we don't believe you. Their hearts were yet to be opened. They were yet to have that Pentecost experience, which came later. They were yet to see Jesus for themselves. They hadn't gone to Galilee where Jesus was waiting to talk to them. But this does record the passage where the people that had seen him were very clear and unshakable. They absolutely knew what they'd seen. And they said, Jesus told us we have to go into the world and preach the gospel. So think on some of these things. Think on how this might affect your life if you adopted the idea that you are part of Christ at your very core, and your personality is very useful in getting around the world, but actually you're much larger than that. You've got a much richer heritage than just your personality. As Christians, we have to really make this a reality so that we can walk and talk and feel close to Christ and act from that platform as Christians. This is the Christian message, and we should learn to grow into it day by day.